Hi, this is Lorraine Watry, and this is part 3 of a watercolor demo of Waterlilies. And I am continuing to work on the background water. And as you can see here, I'm changing the colors as I move throughout the passage. And part of that is because the water really did have some changes in color, and then it also gives the background water more interest to have more than just one color back there. And I'm working dry into dry right there, so I keep the leading edge of my paint wet, make sure that it's still wet as I work back into it, removing a little bit of masking. Continuing to work on the background water and just kind of changing colors as I move. And that's still dry into dry. As long as the paint that I'm putting on is not too wet, then it will continue to just blend into the wet paint next to it on the paper. If I had too much water in my brush, then that could end up being a balloon because it would push back into the area that's not as wet. I added a little water to that section so that I could paint that area without having to worry about it drying before I got all my color in. Using a lot of ultramarine, probably some olive green and quinacridone gold, and for the more purple areas, probably some quinacridone magenta added to the ultramarine blue. Some of those areas I'm painting around have masking on them, and I pre-wet that area. And I forgot to turn my camera back on at one point here, and so through the magic of time-lapse photography, I don't know if it was this area or a little bit farther down. Might be a little bit farther down. All of a sudden it seems to paint itself. Ah, it's this area right here. So I get started, and then all of a sudden it's done. Okay, continuing to work on background water, I'm going in and just because this piece was so detailed in the parts of the water and I wanted it to be as close to the original photo as I could, I kind of moved back and forth so that I can sort of find myself and where I'm working. And it also helps to move around on the paper some, and you start getting in some of the different values, the darks, mediums, and lights, and that gives you something to view all of your other values off of, and also color. So right now I've started working around one of the water lilies that are in the lower right. And I decided to change things up a little bit and work on the blues that are really reflected in the more forward front edge of the painting. And I did a mix here of cobalt blue, some permanent rose, and a little bit of manganese. And I actually put it in a film canister. I wasn't sure how much I was going to need it, so instead of trying to remix that color every time, Then I mixed it and put it in the film canisters to keep it. And I did have to shake it up when I was working with it after it sat for a while because it would separate. And sometimes I would take some of the paint out of that canister and add a little bit of water to it to thin it, or I might add a little bit of manganese or another color just to change it just a little bit. Now I've gone back up to the darker sections, darker passages of the water up above. Still working around the water lilies. Someone asked for one of my other videos what paints I use, and I use a mix of professional watercolor paints, and it's a combination of Daniel Smith and Daler Rowney, Holbein, Winsor and Newton, and I think that's pretty much it. So I use those together, and just the different colors are the ones that I like, and I've had no problems with any of those paints fading or any other issues with them. So I'm removing some of the masking now. And part of the reason I remove the masking at this stage is just so that it doesn't stay on my paper for too long. And it also, even though the masking I use is kind of creamy color, it's not got a color to it per se, but it also can kind of change the view of what you're seeing, especially if the paint you've put down covers over it and gives it some color. So I like to kind of remove that before it gets too far into the painting. Now sometimes I will replace the masking in certain areas, so it kind of depends on what I'm doing whether or not I need to remask an area. I'm working back with some of that blue again. And the water in this painting was definitely like a puzzle. It just had lots of little pieces and changes of color, and actually kind of a lot of fun to paint. So these sections are dry brush or dry into dry. I haven't pre-wet the paper. They don't really need it because I have plenty of time to paint, and because I have masking on some of those areas, I don't have to worry about trying to paint around the masking so much, or the parts of the painting that I don't want to mess up. So the masking preserves those areas. And I will continue to work on the background, and if you would like to see more of this painting and see it to its completion, follow along in the successive videos. And thanks for watching. Oh, and you can find me on my blog at lorrainewatry.blogspot.com if you're interested.